Rutgers Rant. I'm Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media. As always, James Cratch, Keith Sargent are here. It's a blizzard, fellas. The snow is going out my window right now. It is going horizontally. It does not look like we'll be leaving the house in a while. So hopefully this podcast will get you through some snow-related days in Jersey. Lots to talk about. We got basketball. The hoops team is back. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I never panicked. Let's be honest here. Come on. We always knew they'd pull out of this thing. I know the two of you were a little uneasy about what was going on. I understand, but you're not going to call me on that.
You were a voice for a reason. I mean, that's what basically, yeah, absolutely.
A calming presence.
Luckily, Twitter, they delete all their tweets and there's no archive of that. Right. So we won't be able to find any of your rational takes on this.
I still think it was fair to panic.
Yes, I feel dumb because I was actually the least panicky of everyone.
Yeah, so was I. I mean, I think,
But then I kind of jumped on the boat when they lost to Ohio State the second time. No, look, they're back on schedule. I think that's the most important thing.
Right.
There was some sort of weird little stretch here. They just can't have it happen again as we it's February now, guys, which means pretty soon it'll be this is March. So.
Yeah, I mean, 3 straight wins, all of them pretty convincing. You got to give Steve Pikiell some credit here to make that lineup change when to bench Jacob Young, who really played pretty well in December. If you were making the list of the most important players there, I certainly you would include him in the top 3. But moving him to the bench and putting Geo in a position where the offense is rolling through him, Sarge, it just seems like that was the change that had to happen.
Didn't we talk about this a couple of weeks ago? Not to say that, that Steve Pikiell listened or Brandon Knight or any of the other assistant coaches, but I mean, I think we, pointed out that Geo Baker is a point guard. He should be the one, with the ball in his hands and the offense should be rolling through him. I do think, and I think we might have mentioned this too, I didn't think Geo, I think he might have came back too early from the ankle. I mean, I think there's a history with Geo. He's a fierce competitor. And that sometimes you just have to say, to the kid, to the athlete, listen, we've done this before. Same thing happened, 2 years ago. Same thing happened, last year when he was injured, that he might have come back too soon. I think he came back too soon from this ankle injury. I think it bothered him. I think he's healthy now, looks like a completely different player, and you see the results. He's playing great.
Right, those little jump shots, those little turnaround. I mean, that's his patented move.
Bouncing the step.
Yep, bouncing his step. He looks confident again. I think again, Jacob Young off the bench makes a lot of sense. Just that little injection of offense. If I had to make one nitpick, Cratch, and it just drives me crazy. When they started that game against Northwestern, you think, all right, well, this is they threw the ball into Miles Johnson. First 2 possessions, you're like, all right, well, this is going to be the game. He scores 25 and just dominates a bad Northwestern front court. He finishes the game with 3 shots. I'm just still wonder why they can't get him more involved in that offense.
It's like that thing that we always talk about in football where like an offense figures out that something is working and it's like, okay, this is working. Let's stop doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it just seems like it's that way, especially on a night where he's not necessarily in foul trouble or he is having this impact. I felt last year we talked about they were almost held hostage game to game by whatever his situation was.
Right.
And now he's made this major step forward. It's just kind of like, use it, I don't get that either. And, I think the other concern you have to have is this is a team that's up 31-11, and then all of a sudden Northwestern's back in the game. They got to cut out that kind of lull that allows a shaky team to get back in it.
That didn't bother me. A lot of people, when we Rutgers Insider, that was a big question from several people. Just why did they turn off what they're doing? I never thought they were going to lose that game. I think the thing that concerns me more is that we're still seeing a Ron Harper who doesn't quite look like the player he was, Sarge, in earlier in the year. I don't know if that is as big as an issue as it feels like it is, but I don't know that they can be as good a team with him playing the way he's playing now. The ceiling is much lower.
Yeah, I'm going to say something that we might have been laughing at if I would have said this like 2 months ago when he was off to a torrid start, but. He does not have a fundamentally sound. If you're teaching how to shoot a jump shot, you would not show Ron Harper Jr. Really? It's flat. It's a flat jump shot. So I think the reason why he's in this rut and he is. I mean, he's missed 29 of the last 34 3-pointers, I think. The reason why he's in this rut is because I think that he needs to shoot his way out of it and he needs to find his form. Simple as that.
Right. And you're absolutely right. He has to keep on shooting, and if eventually you would think a guy that talented, it would snap.
You'll figure. And the good thing is, look, he's last night was a perfect example. He's 0 for 4. He abandoned the 3-point shot and was able to kind of contribute in other ways. So I mean, he's still finding ways to be productive.
Right. I think it's important we talk about Geo Baker making headlines for some off the court comments, likening the NCAA to modern day slavery. I got to be honest with you, it's not, it really didn't strike me as the least bit offensive when I first read it. He's certainly not the first person to make that comparison, but on Saturday night, he did go on, after the game and clarified what he was trying to say. And I think, the comments he made after the game were obviously much more, put a lot more thought into it, much more eloquent than just a social media post he fired off, where, he makes the point. I mean, that, that my name, image, and likeness are now owned by somebody else, right? And then that is the whole issue, Cratch, with college sports right now. That's what they're fighting for.
No doubt. And I think that it's especially kind of pertinent and poignant coming from Geo Baker because, and we've written about NIL before, like, I think there's this common misconception about who's going to benefit from NIL once this all becomes in effect. Geo Baker is one of the few guys at Rutgers who would actually have a market change or improvement. His NIL is worth something at Rutgers. And there's not many athletes at Rutgers that can say that. I would argue Geo might be the only guy that could go to a bar downtown and get a significant, sponsorship deal. Geo's the only guy at Rutgers I can think of that could film a commercial. I think there's kind of this idea that we're going to have NIL, and a lot of these, with the exception of, the Trevor Lawrences and the Justin Fields, you're not going to see a lot of star athletes really benefit from that. But Geo is one guy there is stuff being left on the table for him because of the current rules. He's right. They're not fair. They should have their NIL. It's the least the NCAA can do. And honestly, it's the least the Big Ten can do, because look, the Big Ten has made it very clear that after the stoppage with football, they're just going to go full steam ahead, and they're chugging right into this thing into March. And the idea of we're going to move the Big Ten basketball tournament to Indianapolis so everyone can just stay there. Well, if you're Geo Baker and Rutgers, you might have to be in Indianapolis for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, I love St. Elmo's, guys, but come on. 6 weeks in Indianapolis.
You can only do that, 5 nights in a given week, right? I mean,
exactly.
St. Elmo's that's 5 nights is the limit. Yes, absolutely.
Because we're gonna bubble even before we have to bubble, and this is it's a lot.
It's never been more of a business, Sarge. I mean, that's it. That's the whole thing. And if you're denying that now, if you can't, the whole idea that this is amateur sports, when you're looking what these kids are doing, and as Gio said, for our entertainment, it's
correct.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and I've talked to Senator Chris Murphy about it, who's been at the forefront of this. Now, Chris Murphy, and I was talking to people, in his orbit. He just wrote a pretty big op-ed with Yahoo the other day. Again, I've spoken with him, during the summer. He's done 3 different reports. He, vows to pass legislation, to mandate that the NIL that we're talking about is taken out of the college's hands and given to the student athletes' hands, which I think would be a good place to start. He's also, talked about making them, allowing them to be able to collectively bargain their rights and essentially unionize, which in that case, you can make an argument. I've heard different people who are inside athletics, if that's the case, and become, quote unquote employees. And if they're employees, then you're opening up a can of worms that, again, we could dedicate an entire podcast on this, and we wouldn't have enough time to talk about it. But basically, if they become employees, then, the whole right, all the rights as far as, keeping a scholarship from year to year, coaches could fire them essentially if they're an employee, if they miss a practice or if they skip class or whatever, then they could essentially fire them. So I don't know if we want to go down that path. The NIL is long overdue. the NCAA, back in January, again, kicked the can down the road. They had their, their lawyers basically, say that, if we do this, we're opening up a can of worms and creating issues legally. So they kicked the can down the road again, put it on the back burner, but long overdue. It will happen. And again, I think, in the next couple months, I think, the key is going to be to give them as many rights as possible. I will argue one thing on what Crash said. I think there are more than just Geo Baker as far as athletes. I think you will get some other athletes being able to, from Olympic sports, be able to get compensation from camps and that sort of stuff.
Crash, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I was going to say I should have been clear. Like I totally agree with you, Sarge. Like I think that most of the NIL beneficiaries at Rutgers are going to be, the Olympic sport athletes. I mean, think about the wrestlers. I mean, Sebastian Rivera could go hold a 3-hour camp everywhere in New Jersey.
Soccer players can. Yep.
Soccer players, Mira Ali, field hockey, Gianna Glatz. Two thing I will add is, one, I think it's very important that the NCAA is the big boogeyman in this whole thing. The NCAA is the member institutions. Mark Emmert's just a guy in a suit who gets paid to advocate for his bosses, which are all the colleges around the country, and they put on championship events. So I think that, this is something where it needs to dig down to, it's the Big Ten, it's the SEC, it's the ACC. Like if they say, okay, we want to side with our student athletes, then it would be a moot point, and the NCAA would do what it had to do.
All right. And there's one in the broader picture. This is a big issue for college sports. It's not going away. In the micro issue, just for Rutgers, I think you have to, if you're a fan, you have to like the fact you've got an athlete like Geo Baker who is thoughtful, who is well spoken on the issue, and wants to be a leader in it, and a coach in Steve Peichel who supports him, which is, I think, a big deal. All right, let's dive into true or false here, guys. We've got a lot more to talk about football and wrestling and other things, but as always, you know the rules here. True or false? Rutgers is going to be sweating out the tournament bubble in a month. Cratch, true or false?
False.
Sarge?
False.
True or false? Rutgers will be safely in, but as an 8 seed or lower. Cratch, true or false?
True.
Okay. Sarge?
False.
True or false? Forget that. This team is going to win 6 of its final 8 games and get a very good seed in the NCAA tournament. Correct. True or false?
False.
All right. Sarge?
True.
You think that kind of runs possible? I'm going to go true, too. I think it's possible, and we can talk about it at the end. True or false? This team can keep winning even with Ron Harper in this current slump. Correct.
True.
Sarge?
False.
Yeah, I think false, especially when the next 2 games in Minnesota and Iowa. All right, true or false? Forget winning 3 games. The most impressive accomplishment for Rutgers football this season was just 1 positive COVID test. Correct. True or false?
True.
Sarge?
True.
It was a nugget from my interview with Greg Shannon, which we'll talk about here in a minute. True or false? $114 million. The financial picture is as bleak as ever for Rutgers. Cratch, true or false?
True.
Sarge, this is your nugget from the week. True or false?
Short term, it's really bad. True.
True. All right. And finally, true or false? The wrestling team never wins a big match. I'm going to you first, Sarge. True or false?
Scott Cadell's listening. I know. He has his own podcast. He can rip us on his own podcast. True.
Cratch, true or false? I mean, I know what you're going to say here. And before you even answer the question, I just feel like we are constantly in this thing. Like twice a year, we have this moment where we're like, all right, it's all lining up now. Here comes Ohio State. They've got the right weight class, right guys going in. This is going to be the one where they're going to beat Ohio State. And we come back and they never win that match. Am I missing something? I missed one along the years where they won one of these matches?
Well, they beat Nebraska a few years back when Nebraska, I think, was number 4 in the country. They've had some big dual meet wins. I mean, I think that they're a couple wins over Princeton, especially the one where Ashnault beat Kolodzik. They didn't get enough credit for that because that was a match that Princeton should have won. They almost beat Princeton last year. Again, almost. So right. I will say true. I think it's a little bit more complicated than the simple question you asked for the purposes of this true-false endeavor, but I will say true.
He broke the rules. Politi, he just broke the rules. Just say true, and we will get to the other side.
The headline of this right now is Cratch does not think Goodell has elevated the program. That's what he's saying.
He put him on the hot seat.
Put him on the hot seat. And I understand, there's been no program that's the national champions, Soriano, Ash. I understand the whole thing, but it just seems
they did finish top 10 in the NCAA tournament.
I get that too. I understand. I just don't know why when just never seem to every now and then maybe it's the sport, which again I acknowledge I do not follow it closely, don't understand a lot about it, but it just seems like perception wise. All right, so let's before I get Barry wrestling any further, Sarge, $114 million. Tell us about the story you did this week.
Yeah, so they've spent an all-time high, $114 million. The revenue, they're actually conceding a deficit. So they brought in $103 million in revenue. The university subsidy actually went down a little bit. The student fee went up a little bit. This is all from the 19-20 academic year. So basically the 2019 football season, which we all knew was going to be a complete disaster from a financial standpoint, from a football standpoint. We all saw the tickets, and we talked about the season tickets. We already reported that. We saw it with our own eyes as far as attendance. We all knew that football revenue was going to be bad. We talked about it beforehand, like even a year before, on whether or not Pat Hobbs should bring back Chris Ash. Everyone knew it was going to be a disaster. It was, from a financial standpoint, it was everything that we envisioned. There was a lot of severance, on the books. So, they spent an all-time high, $114 million. They're still really struggling to bring in revenue. I've heard many Rutgers officials say for a long time that Rutgers doesn't have a spending problem. They have a revenue producing problem. Very true. Still true. The light at the end of the tunnel has always been the Big Ten full share. That was supposed to be in 2021 at the end of this fiscal year in July. They won't get that full check for another at least 7 years, but it's probably going to be more because they're borrowing for facilities, other stuff that we plan on reporting as well. So. Short term is not good.
The scariest part, though, Sarge, the long-term thing is an issue because they're not going to have fans in the building for basketball this year.
It's an issue,
and it's not going to be a full crowd of the football stadium in New Jersey in September.
There's going to be an awakening because either university is just going to have to come to grips because the faculty's not pleased about it. They went to court to sue over more transparency as far as what their all the borrowing is about, and their whole point is, look, athletics, anyone who says that it's only 2% of the university overall budget, which isn't true actually. In this fiscal report, it shows that it's 8% of the university $1.4 billion budget, which again, 8%, wow. you want to say, well, athletics is still a small piece of the pie, but the faculty will argue that tuition keeps on going up, and that you're laying off faculty left and right, and so faculty, their argument is that the money that they've funneled into athletics it does have an effect. I'm not saying that they're right. I'm just saying that at some point there's going to be an awakening because, like you said, they're not. There's going to be a long time before they start bringing in revenue from ticket sales, contributions. They're going to continue to be down. I don't see, and again, the light at the end of the tunnel as far as the Big Ten distribution, it could be $44 million, in this coming year, which is nothing to sneeze at. But even that's not going to create a dent in the deficit at this point.
All right, it's the other nugget about the one COVID test was I had an hour-long chat with Greg Schiano last week, and a lot of stuff came out of it, and the fact that I still find that remarkable, and that they went through this entire season essentially with just one positive COVID test. Had a lot of problems with the false positives over that period. Some other takeaways from the interview, the conversation, he is really encouraged by the number of players who are sticking around. And I think that is a big, we have been asked that question a million times from Rutgers insiders during the course of the year, like who's going to come back? And if you were to make a list of the 10 guys they wanted back, I think they probably got 9 of them. And that's good from two standpoints. One, they'll have an experienced team at a lot of positions next year, but also I think he likes it because he's got 17 newcomers in the building, the Hale Center, in January. I mean, he's bringing all these guys, he's bringing in an entire, these guys are here now to help this new group understand what his culture, what he's trying to build. So that was a big point he made. And the other point I like Sarge was he also said that, as we were having this debate on this podcast about whether or not fans should be frustrated and disappointed by them blowing the game, he was on that side. He was very frustrated by some of those results during the course of the year. And he said so. Like when he looked back on the year, he looked back on it both fondly for what they overcame with COVID, but also he was disappointed in a lot of ways.
I thought it was your second most fascinating piece of journalism over last week. I mean, great job getting the football coach on the record. You got 2 stories, both of them I would highly recommend. But the best one I thought was, you're looking for a Super Bowl angle, right? A local Super Bowl angle. And Steve Politti's been covering Super Bowl for many years. Right now I'm watching him. He's in his Montclair home. Like he has, a parka on. I mean, he's literally about to shovel 2 feet of snow. He should be, by all rights, should be in Tampa, and he found a Super Bowl angle from a Rutgers perspective. Scotty Miller caught the touchdown, at the end of the half against the Green Bay Packers, wide receiver for Tampa Bay.
Biggest
has a local angle. Take it away, Steve.
Yes, so Scotty Miller is now married to a Rutgers gymnast. Her name is Jenna Rizkala. She also happens to be the daughter of one of our tech support guys. Great guy, Paul, has saved us a million times when we have laptop issues.
Definitely.
So they met at Bowling Green when they were both freshmen. She transferred to Rutgers, and they maintained a long distance relationship for 3 years. And what I found fascinating, and Sarge just mentioned.
Well, did he transfer to Rutgers too?
That as well. So this is what I found great. And I got done with this conversation, talked to them for 45 minutes. Great conversation. He's talking about how he's coming here. They see each other when she goes out for meets out in Penn State. He'll drive out there. He'll drive to campus. Yeah. He's throwing with Art Sikowski on campus. She eventually goes and interns at the football office. So she is working in the football office
for Chris.
And this guy is an NFL prospect. He was drafted in the NFL.
And Rutgers needed wide receivers, right?
Rutgers does not have any wide receivers, and the most remarkable thing is how the hell did that guy not get? How did not get him to transfer to Rutgers? His girlfriend is a gymnast for the team. She works for the football office. How did Chris Ash? I mean, what happened there?
And he spent all this time on campus, right?
On campus wearing a Rutgers T-shirt. We have a picture of him in the rack with a Rutgers T-shirt. He caught 23 passes at Bowling Green. How in the world? What? I know he's 5'11". Okay, I get it. He's 160 pounds. He's in the NFL now.
In fairness to Scotty Miller, given the track record of Chris Ash era wide receiver development, if he had come to Rutgers, he'd probably be working with Patrick Mahomes because he'd be working at State Farm. I mean,
so you think it's possible he said no? They might have asked him.
Certainly possibly said no, but I'm sure Bowling Green, probably a better place to be a wide receiver prospect than Rutgers, in the past couple of years.
Right, yeah, it worked out for him. Yeah, I guess that's a good point, Crash. Perhaps he's smarter than to sign up for the offense with Jerry Kill at that point.
Can I just say one quick thing about the financials?
Yeah, do it.
At some point, I just think Rutgers has to realize, it's like the national debt in Washington. It's never going to go away.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Totally agree with you.
There's no because it's not like they could it's not like they could pass the hat around and come up with, $80 million, take a big old dent out of that, So, yeah, I just think, this is the way, this is the operation. It's the way it's going to be. They do have a revenue problem. Look, they're going to make more money once people can go back to the football games if the basketball team keeps winning. They're definitely going to make more revenue, but they're never going to make all of the revenue possible to overcome this. And what I would say is, I think Sarge is right. There's going to be an awakening, a reckoning. I've said this on the podcast before. I'll say it again. The big four sports, basketball, men's and women's basketball, football, the big three, I guess, just put them to the side. Maybe wrestling. All the other sports should run through the university. That's how you fix this problem. So all that TV money, which, when they put it in the financial report, they put it in a lump sum. No, that's football money. So put that there and then do everything else on the side.
an accounting decision. That's all it is. That would solve the problem. Interesting. All right, let's dive into some Rutgers insider question, guys. We had a bunch of them today. I think people are sitting around in the snow with nothing to do, so I appreciate that. NJ.com/insider to sign up if you haven't already. We've had some good chats too. Sarge, Kratch and Fonseca were on there talking to basketball guys about this stuff. That was people seem to really enjoy that. So sign up if you haven't. First question, this is a good one. What is the ceiling for Rutgers long-term with Steve Pikiell as head coach? Should we expect to compete for Big Ten titles every year, or should we be happy with making the NCAA tournament every other year? It's funny. It really is a great question. I don't know that is he necessarily recruiting at the NCAA every year level, but then again, he's got an NCAA team this year, and you could say those recruits weren't on that level. We want to take this one first, Kratch. What do you think? What is the ceiling for Rutgers basketball?
So, give me a second here, because I'm going to try to explain this in a simple enough fashion. I've always thought that Pikiell's ceiling would be like look at every 4 years, there'd be like a natural year where you're rebuilding. There'd be a year where at the top of your cycle, you're really good. You think you can make the Sweet 16. And then there's like 2 years in the middle where you're good. Maybe you make the NCAA tournament. Maybe you make the NIT. You just try to get the best out of it. And if you have a good run, you're going to maybe make the tournament 3 out of those 4 years. I think this is going to be a developmental program. I think that fans give him a hard time for the recruiting, but as I said in our chat, it's not like his recruiting has been bad, like Ash era bad for football. I mean, he still has I believe he signed 6 of the top 20 recruits in the history of Rutgers basketball. That's not very bad, all things considered.
Right. No, that's pretty damn good. Sarge, do you agree? What do you think the ceiling is?
No, I think the ceiling is, the Final Four, national championship. Yeah, absolutely. Are you kidding me? Why? Because they have a $115 million facility that's gorgeous, and they don't have any excuse whatsoever from the facility standpoint.
Haven't been to the tournament in 30 years, though.
But we're talking about the ceiling. What's the ceiling?
The ceiling. Okay. Fair.
Yeah. If your question is what's the ceiling, then, what's the ceiling? As he always says, if you're competing, they should be able to compete for Big Ten championships. If you're competing for Big Ten championships, then you should be competing for Final Four and national championships. Simple as
right. Well, you can compete but can you compete every year at Rutgers for one? You think so? He can recruit at the level where he can beat Michigan.
Can he do it?
Michigan State.
I think the jury's out whether or not. I think initially, I think I kind of look at him as a Jay Wright type, where he's going to get the guys who are right below and want to get guys who are going to be 4-year guys. Geo Baker is a perfect example. Jay Wright is a master at it, like Josh Hart, a bunch of guys who were not one and dones, really hard to do, who are, future pros, but don't leave after 1 or 2 years. Right. And I kind of think that, that's the track that he wants to do from a recruiting standpoint. Again, at some point, can you win in the Big Ten long term? He might have to get like Crash said, Cliff is a perfect example. Who was highly recruited. If you can get more of those types of guys, then the Jay Wright comparison goes out the window. But as far as ceiling, I mean, come on, I mean, can they win the national championship? Absolutely.
Right. All right. So this ties into the next question pretty well. Let's take this through. An insider wants to know, do we know if Miles Johnson is sticking around next year? So you guys answer that one and answer this. Let's say he does leave and Geo leaves. I mean, what are you looking at for this team to do next year? I mean, put it in that perspective. You think you can win the national championship or compete for the Big Ten title every year? Would it compete for it next year in that situation?
Miles Johnson, I think, is going to need to come back. He's not I don't think he's a true 7-footer. NBA, the game, is just evolved to a point where, guys who aren't perimeter based, unless you're, just an absolute stud inside, they're just not, they're not going to the NBA. Also, free throw shooting is an issue. I mean, he is going to have to improve that, or else he's going to be a detriment, with under 4 minutes to go in a game. You're not going to be able to play him. So, I think Miles Johnson's gonna come back. I think Geo Baker. I think he's gonna be the question is gonna boil down to. I think he's as good as he's gonna be. A year from now, I think Geo Baker is a really, really, really good college player. If he's not a first-round pick, does he have to come back? I think that's going to be a personal decision, but I don't know if he's going to get a whole lot better as far as as an NBA prospect.
Yeah, I think his comments on what he thinks about the NCAA may have shed some light on what he's going to do after that. Kratch, what do you think on that question?
I would say I think Sarge is right. I think Miles probably should come back. Geo, I think what's tough with the basketball guys is there's so many more ways to make money playing professional basketball than football. We had this talk before the football season ended, and I think we've been kind of proven right. Most of the guys came back just because you didn't look at any of those players and say, okay, they're going to be a second-round draft pick. But a guy like Geo Baker, I don't think he would be a first-round NBA pick. Maybe a second-round pick if a team liked him, but he can go overseas and make really good money playing basketball, all over the world. CJ Geddes is in England, China, South America, Asia, Russia. There are all these places out there. Some of them are a little kind of maybe wouldn't want to be there. I know, you see a guy who's, I'm going to go play in, Chechnya. I'm like, okay, I don't know if I want to do that. But you can make money and good money and have a great career overseas. So I think that also is a complication for basketball guys where it makes it tougher to kind of forecast what they're going to do.
Another question. Any insight on not going deeper on the bench with both Miles and Cliff with 4 fouls? Miles played so timid on D with 4 fouls that he wasn't very effective. That is true at the end of the Northwestern game. I just get the sense now, Kratch, I don't know if you agree, just get the sense that he has decided he's playing. This is his 8-man rotation. Everyone's healthy. And going any deeper now, bringing in some of the freshmen who saw action earlier in the season might throw off chemistry more than it'll help.
No, I think it's that. I think it's also, there's a guy like Dean Reiber has a promising future, but there's a drop off at this point in time. So you got to kind of stick with the guys that you trust.
All right, another one. We've got a lot of questions, Sarge, just about what happened after Rutgers goes up 30-11. Looks like they're cruising before they went into the slide at the end of the first half where they looked absolutely awful. Between that and missing free throws, it will hurt them in the close games against good teams. Are you concerned at all by some of these lapses you're seeing from this team?
I'm concerned about the free throws. We've talked about, I don't know any other way to put it. I think, the free throw, the lapses, watching basketball long enough. They
weren't going to score.
Game of runs. Right. That's going to happen. Northwestern's, has decent talent. They can shoot. The 3-pointer is a great equalizer. So I could see how a team like that can get back into a game like that. But the free throws are is going to be the thing that when we look back on, okay, well, why did they did they lose here, or what happened? It's going to more than likely it's going to be because they had an issue at the free throw line.
All right, a couple of football questions from Alex M. Alex wants to know, is it just me or is this football roster, even without knowing the depth we'll add from grad transfers, really looking like a viable Big Ten roster? Kratch, we saw what it did last year with the newcomers. Are you going to put it in the viable Big Ten roster category?
Yes, I think they're definitely getting to a point where they have viable Big Ten, caliber talent and depth. That being said, I don't know how far we want to go into this. I don't think that's necessarily going to result in another big jump in 2021 from the big jump they took, obviously, from 19 to 20. But they're getting there. I just don't know if it's going to immediately pay off just yet.
Alex also wants to know, he says he's the guy banging the Sikowski drum. I will admit, after Art's couple of games, while they were okay, it's clear now why the staff sees Vedral as their QB1. Any chance that Vedral is not the starter for game 1? I think it's a very slim chance. Do you agree, Sarge?
Yeah, I think Vedral's going to be the starting quarterback just based on everything that we've seen. Getting back to the first question, what I like, you touched on it before, all the guys he's bringing back. I said going into last season, they had Big Ten talent in their starting, 11 on both sides of the football. Problem is, it's a long season, and this season proved it. When you have 9 Big Ten games, you're going to get beat up, and they didn't have the depth. That being said, I think this has been Greg Schiano's plan all along. Bring in some grad transfers, immediately help the top end of the roster, and then try to develop your recruits. He's from his interview with you and from talking to him as well in press conferences, he seems to be very high on both the first recruiting class and this current one that he's bringing in. I think couple the guys who have come back, who are going to be, fifth year, some 6th year seniors who are going to be, Big Ten players, caliber starters, with the depth that he's adding. I think, it's probably going to be the most, promising roster that they've had since they joined the Big Ten.
All right, here's a recruiting question. It kind of ties into that pretty well. Recruiting seems to have stalled for Schiano's 2021 class and Pikiell's 2021 and 2022 classes. Any updates on high targets? Hard to say it's stalled with Pikiell's 2021 class. His best player for that class is sitting on the bench. Am I right? Am I wrong? But Cratch, what about you did a couple interesting recruiting stories, one on the quarterback from Arizona with Florida State, and it looked like that they're trying to get involved in some other high-profile quarterbacks too. What's going on?
Yeah, so Nico Marchiol, I think I said the name right. He committed to Florida State on Sunday, but it was kind of this. I was very intrigued by it because here's a kid with long hair from Arizona who doesn't have Rutgers in his top 8, and then all of a sudden has Rutgers in his final 4. So obviously,
what the hell does the long hair have to do with it?
I don't know. It was like a Trevor Lawrence thing,
Okay,
that's where it's coming from. Yeah, no, that's all. It's just that's where it came from. I probably should have explained that better. But anyway, so that I talked to his quarterback coach, and it sounded like, look, obviously, like the kid went to Florida State. It was one of those things where the coach even said, out there when he announced his Final Four, people were like, okay, we get Florida, we get Florida State, we get Arizona State. What's a Rutgers? But it sounds like Greg Schiano and Sean Gleason did a really good job, building a relationship with the kid. Got to the point where it was legitimate, although he chose Florida State. But the important takeaway I had was, in this weird kind of 2022 COVID recruiting world, when quarterbacks commit so early, you have a situation where spots start filling up, and some of these guys who maybe weren't, at the top of the heap early on, so they've been able to kind of be noticed. As these guys get to camps in the summer, hopefully there are camps, and people start to be able to go to campus again, you might have top-level quarterback recruits, potentially even 4-star kids, who don't have a place to go later in the process. And here's a school like Rutgers that has playing time available for them, and desperately needs to get a quarterback in the 2022 class. I could see a situation where Rutgers kind of, maybe luck isn't the right word, but they are in a position to grab a top quarterback recruit down the stretch that you wouldn't have thought they would have been in position to get otherwise.
It is interesting that they're opening it up to you're right, to different states and broadening it out. I know they have what is the kid from Timber Creek? Isn't he one of their top football?
Donovan Leary, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that'll be interesting to see if you're right, if they do add one from someplace else. All right, here's a good one for you, Sarge. I feel like Pat Hobbs has been quiet lately. What's he up to? And I guess, I don't know, my first thing I would say is like, these kind of ADs are supposed to be quiet. I mean, when you have a football coach who's the face of the program, and your basketball coach is doing a great job. But you talked to him recently, so what is Pat Hobbs up to?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to him for 20 minutes the other day about a wide range of topics, mostly about the Rodkin Center, which they just opened up. A facility. It's an academic building mainly for the entire athletics department, but it also houses the men's and women's lacrosse teams and the men's and women's soccer teams. You have seen the videos. I mean, you can look at the videos. It looks like a beautiful building. Costs about $70 million, and everyone's really happy about it. It's the latest, in their facility plans. But he also talked about what's going on with the football facility, and that's been quiet, for the past year, and obviously because they haven't been able to really fundraise a whole lot. But as we reported right before the pandemic happened, right before the Big Ten tournament was canceled, but they signed a deal with a infrastructure firm that's going to create a master plan, facilities master plan. That report will be coming out in the next couple months. Pat Hobbs says that once that report comes, they plan to fundraise off that. That's where you're going to see the plans for the first time of the football building, the $150 million football building, more than likely. In the meantime, the Hale Center is the football program completely occupies the Hale Center. So they're going to do some relatively modest improvements there, probably a player lounge, something to that effect. And all you have to do is have a conversation with Pat Hobbs, though. And he is, talks about the vision of all the things that he wants to do. He wants to do, improvements inside SHI Stadium, inside the rack, fan-friendly stuff. You think, lounges. Think, like a lounge down, on the court where the media center is. He wants to do something like that inside the rack. He wants to utilize some of the space the newfound space that they have from the offices that were taken out in the rack. He wants to do some more lounges on the other side of the stadium where the press box is currently. He wants to bring in revenue that way. So long term, in the next 10 years, I think he wants to drive more revenue with fan friendly experiences. I think. He's even talked about baseball, softball at some point, and this might be in the master plan. Both of them getting a 3,000 seat stadium, something to that effect. So he really does have a lot of different visions for where he wants to go. I scratched at the surface on some of the reporting of that, but I think he really does have some pretty big grand facility plans.
Yeah, that's what happens in the background. All right, good update. That's good to hear. Final question, and this is I didn't have a good answer for this. Maybe one of you guys do. What is a memorable Rutgers snow event for you? I was trying to think about this, Sarge. There hasn't been one. What was the game against West Virginia where it snowed on the way home and a late October game?
Well, yeah, there's two. Obviously the LeGrand West Virginia game.
Of course, that's the one.
LeGrand against West Virginia, which I had a wedding that day, so I didn't even go. One of the biggest Rutgers games. Sports Illustrated called it their event of the year, and I wasn't there, but that
got
was
married.
An in-law. So, okay. But my youngest daughter was part of the wedding party, so I couldn't have missed it.
Right.
But yeah, I think that comes to mind. That was an October, really freakish snowfall event. The other one is the infamous Snowgate game, I guess, where Rutgers basketball played against Marquette. Gary Waters got stuck in at Kent State, wasn't able to get back. Freddie Hill coached the game. That was a game that a lot of people pointed to. The reason why Bob Mulcahy hired Freddie Hill.
Yes,
that was and I covered that game. There were other media people who weren't able to get there. I did trek the 8 miles through uphill both ways, I think.
You want to hear a funny story about that game? I was in Turin for the Olympics. Yeah. And I was there. This is when Adrian Wojnarowski was the columnist. If you don't know who Woj is now, obviously he is the biggest NBA expert on the planet. Back then he was the columnist for the Bergen Record, and he was he was just a notorious fireball thrower at the Scarlet Knights. And so we were both in the media center at the Turin Olympics. And I forget what I was covering. I think I was covering curling that day. And I said to Woj, what are you doing today? He's like, I'm going to write Rutgers basketball. You're not going to write Rutgers basketball? I'm like, Woj, I'm in Italy. I'm going to cover the Olympics. This is what I cover. So he completely destroyed everyone involved with Rutgers during that. And I had a completely BS column about curling. So he made the right decision. His career has been a little bit on a different trajectory than mine, and that was one example, perhaps, of why. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish your. No,
that was those two games come to mind though. Those are the first, and I just remember a few times where the bubble has come down, and having to call school officials because the bubble has come down, it's popped and whatever, and a couple times they weren't able to get it back. So you worry now, this is a pretty bad storm with high winds, and is it going to be able to survive? Is Greg Schiano in his quest to maybe speed along the facility out there with a knife trying to, cut it down? Hey, look, guys, it's down. We got to build the 150 now, the $150 million facility. Got to build it. Is he out there right now? I don't know. We'll see.
Good stuff.
I have it's Rutgers related, but it's not like Rutgers athletics. So I want to say, I can't remember what year it was. I was covering high schools. It was the last Sunday of the state championship football games at High Point Solution Stadium, I guess it was called at the time. And it was going to snow, but it was supposed to snow like later in the day. So we get there, and typical Rutgers parking situation, the Scarlet lot is empty, but they're saying you have to park, the media has to park on that like patch of grass to the side. I don't think it's there anymore. And I told the guy, I said, well, it's going to snow later today and it's going to get muddy. Because there have been two, other games there that weekend, and all our cars are going to get stuck. And the guy's like, no, I promise you, it's not going to happen. Long story short, my car didn't get stuck, but I believe Steve Falk from the APP, his car got stuck, and Rutgers had to call and bring like a tow truck in, some guy wake him up in the middle of the night to pull out his car at the end of the day. But anyway, so I covered the game. I stayed for the first half of the game. It starts to snow. I get out of the Rutgers parking lot. As I'm walking to my car, guy goes, hey, be careful. You might get stuck. And I'm like, oh, really, buddy? You think so? And I had a little tiff with the guy, and I said, who made you park here? I'm like, the guy standing next to you. And that guy was like, Anyway, long story short, I get out of the parking lot, get on 287. It's really bad. And some Mendham High School was playing in the state final. And at halftime, I guess a bunch of the kids left in their dad's sports car. They were going like way too fast, and they literally drove under my SUV. So I was all of a sudden stuck on 287 with an accident and a total. Everyone was okay, thankfully, but the little sports car was folded up.
Holy cow.
The other one, one of the more famous ones I thought you were going to mention was Rutgers Princeton, when they had that outdoor wrestling match over, inside the football stadium. It was gorgeous. It was like 75 degrees. Couldn't have had a better outdoor weather for a wrestling match. Then they played a football game afterward. And by the end of the football game, it was just Jersey weather. It had changed to the point where it actually snowed, in the late stages of that football game. So, another one of those 70 degrees at one point, and then all of a sudden it's snowing at the end of the day.
Good stuff, guys. All right. Well, I think we covered it all. Anything else you want to add before we sign off for the week? No. All right.
No, I think I'm pretty good.
Everyone, thanks for listening. We'll be back soon to discuss the latest developments with the basketball team. Steve Politi, James Kratch, Keith Sargent, signing off. Thanks.
Looking for a new podcast to listen to? Here's what we love, courtesy of Acast Recommends.
So 2 years ago today, I was driving across the country through the South. And when I finished, I knew I wanted to make a travel show.
Think about what that does to a place.
It's history. You're not going to change history.
And now, with all that's going on politically and socially, and the fact that international travel isn't really an option, it seems like the perfect time to explore the U.S. Greetings from somewhere. I'm Zach Mack, and tap that subscribe button because this week we're hitting the road.
Acast
Recommends.